Assalamu alaikum everyone.
We're back with another episode of Muslimedium.
This episode will be centered on Muslim women in celebration of World Hijab Day in February and International Women's Day in March. So, let's begin.
Hold up. What about the answer to the riddle?
Oh yes, the riddle. Do you want to recap the riddle for our listeners?
Yeah, so the riddle was, I am a prayer amongst the 5 obligatory prayers. I am prayed quietly, and the prayer before me and after me are prayed loudly. So what prayer am I?
And the answer is Asr prayer on Jummah. And the reason for that is because on a Jummah, your Jummah prayer would be prayed loudly and your Maghrib prayer would be prayed loudly. But on a normal day, your Zuhr prayer would be prayed quietly.
So if you enjoyed that, please do stick around till the end to hear the next Islamic riddle.
And with that being said, let's get into our first segment. Well, that's news to me. Let's discuss Muslim women and some of their fantastic achievements today.
So one thing that's really great to see now is that Muslim women are able to showcase their amazing talent and skills in robotics. So there's actually a team from Turkey of high school students who were able to go to the most prestigious robot competition in the US in 2019. Americans who had never seen a team made up of only girls were really surprised.
Yeah, there was also a story a few years ago about an Afghan girls robotics team that actually won the biggest robotics festival in Europe. And the irony was that they were initially denied entry to the US.
Man, that showed them. Yeah, one of the youngest doctors in the world is a Muslim Palestinian refugee hijabi, and that's so inspiring to see that a Muslim sister who's been through so much struggle and she's overcome every barrier in front of her and achieved success in her field at the end of it, alhamdulillah.
Yeah, mashallah tabarakallah, that's great. Talking of pioneering, the first founder of universities was a Muslim woman. Fatima bint Muhammad al-Fihriya al-Qurayshiyya in 895 CE created the first ever university in Fez, which is now in Morocco.
And our final story, which gained a lot of coverage recently, was a Muslim woman from MCB who got hounded by a BBC presenter on why there aren't female imams. So here's the clip.
How many female imams are there in the UK at the moment? Just because I presume we'll get to this more, but representing, of course, women, which you will do as part of this, how many do we have in Britain?
I mean, I think, again, I wouldn't have a clue on these numbers because my role is making sure that we include our affiliates, particularly women, in the work that we are doing and making sure that where our structures as well as the work we do are truly representative. So I think that
you don't know, that's fine if you don't know, but do we have female imams in this country?
I mean, again, it's not, are you referring to chaplains or are you referring to women that lead the prayer? What are you referring to? And I think...
Well, you tell me. I'm genuinely intrigued to know. Of course, female priests have been around for some time. We've also seen the advent of female rabbis in this country. What is the picture for women leading prayer in...
Man, so that was so patronising and insensitive. And can we just talk about the fact that she says, oh, it's okay if you don't know, but what's the answer to the question? Like, she just doesn't give her a chance. Yeah. And it just, it's really annoying.
Yeah, you can tell she wanted a really specific answer from that situation. But mashallah tabarakallah, Zara handled the situation with a lot of grace.
Yeah, she did, and mashallah tabarakallah. It just seems that they just don't really understand the role of imams in the first place.
Yeah, they really don't. Ajmal Masroor actually explained this really well in his answer, so we're going to play that now.
How many female imams are there?
The answer to this question is very simple. No, there isn't one to lead a congregation of mixed prayer, as it's done within Christianity or perhaps other religions. However, an imam's role isn't confined to only leading mixed congregational prayer. A Muslim woman can be an imam of female-only congregation. An imam provides an intellectual, political, social, economic, spiritual leadership guiding people when they need it most. An imam isn't confined to just leading prayers. Imam is respected, venerated, and they can be woman and man. By the way, throughout Islamic history, we've had thousands of women and men providing intellectual, spiritual, political, economic, and social leadership.
Yeah, mashallah, tabarakallah. I think he really sums it up perfectly.
Yeah, what they don't understand is that we can have female chaplains, female alamas, and teachers within the masjid. They don't really care about understanding. They just want to push a certain narrative.
Yeah. It's not even the question that really is the biggest issue here. It's more about the approach that Emma took in asking the question.
Yeah, it was definitely very aggressive. Also, you can't compare rabbis, priests, and imams. I feel like people conflate the three and think they all have the same roles and they're all the same thing, but they're really not. And that's why it's not a fair comparison.
Yeah, and Zara explained to her how she didn't want to answer the question because it's not part of her role, but she just kept on going back.
It's the fact that you're just asking questions for the sake of making someone look bad, even after you've been explicitly told that she's not in the authority to answer that question.
Yeah. Okay, that concludes our That's News to Me section. I'm a student. Get me out of here!
So, for this month's edition of Student Survival, we're going to be discussing the way that women are treated in the world of academia. This all started when I came across a TikTok a few months ago, captioned "Live footage of being a woman in STEM." And so, as an English student, I'm used to being in a female-dominated subject, and I really wanted to know what it was like for women on the other side of the curriculum. So I clicked on the video, and I was completely shocked by the amount of times her male classmates not only interrupted her mid-sentence, but repeatedly talked over her and completely ignored her contributions. So I'm just going to quickly play that TikTok for you guys now. This was taken by the TikToker Cleasel.
Yeah, I mean, these are metrics.
No, I think the deliverables,
Yeah, we would try to use
good
it.
explanation.
So kind of like
Yeah, we need to use data mining basically.
I don't know, but if we want to
In our data mining, I think that we need to focus more on the customer specific data rather than the zip code. Because we want to really break down
input, no. So if it's empty, it means no bank.
selling at this.
So as you guys can kind of get the gist of what was going on in that video, every single time she tries speaking, a male student jumps in and speaks over her.
Man, that was brutal to hear. I can't believe how many times that happened.
I think I counted about 7 times where she was trying to speak only to get completely shut down.
Man, it shouldn't even happen once, let alone 7 times. It's crazy.
And even towards the end of the video, just when you thought she would be able to finish her sentence, again, she gets interrupted. And so this got me thinking, is this a common experience? Is this what women have to go through? Is this a worldwide, universal experience for women working or studying STEM subjects? And so I sent this video to some of the group chats at my university, and so many female STEM students came back to me and said, yeah, I can completely relate to the situation, and it's happened to me so many times. It really brought to mind the term mansplaining for me, because it's a concept I've come across before, but I've never seen it demonstrated and talked about so much until I saw this video. And mansplaining, according to the Oxford Language Dictionary, is the explanation of something by a man, typically to a woman, in a manner regarded as condescending or patronising. And it's a bit of a contested term because some people believe that it doesn't exist, some people believe it's quite sexist.
Well, I actually think it does exist. The fact that someone has experienced it is enough of an indication that it exists. I think maybe those are the people who haven't really experienced it.
Yeah, and so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to conduct a social study and see what people at my university who are studying STEM subjects thought about this term.
Yeah, that's good.
And try and get some data on how common this experience is. The findings I got back were really interesting. From the students that I did survey, 54.2% were STEM students and 37.5% were from arts and humanities. So we had a good mix, but they were mainly STEM students who I surveyed. And out of the responses I received, a shocking 45.8% of the students said that they have experienced mansplaining before.
Yeah, I can actually believe that.
And that's in an academic, work or social environment. 20.8% reported that they may have, but they're not sure. 33.3% thankfully have said they have not. Yet the fact that almost half of the student survey reported to have experienced it is just awful.
Yeah, that really is.
41% also reported that they have been interrupted, talked over, ignored, or made to feel like they didn't belong at school or university. 16.7% said maybe, and 41.7% said they have not. Of those who were from a STEM background, 2/3 reported that they have or may have experienced mansplaining, while a half of the students of the arts and humanities surveyed also reported similar experiences. From these results, I can conclude that it is more likely that a STEM student will have experienced mansplaining than those studying other subjects. But we should note that these results have been determined from the responses of a single survey, and they can be limited due to the fact that we did survey more STEM students than other fields and departments.
Also, I guess the demographic being quite male dominated for STEM subjects probably makes a big difference as well.
Yeah.
They're more likely to experience that phenomenon when they're in an environment that has more access to men who would exhibit that behaviour.
Yeah. And also this is from a single university with a small sample size. From those who did report to have had some experiences of mansplaining, I asked them to share some personal testimonies and accounts of these incidents anonymously. I felt like their stories and voices needed and deserved to be heard, and I was just blown away by just how many responses I got back from them. So here's what some of them had to say about mansplaining in the world of academia.
I was in a really high-level university meeting, and this guy from the health faculty's department mansplained COVID to me. I came back with papers and citations the next week to show him up, but he retired by then. I feel like it happens more in group work when the lecturers or seminar leaders are not there. I do see some girls actually call people out on it, which I admire.
I just love the fact that she said I came back with papers and citations. Like, yes, girl, go.
Yeah.
It's such a shame. Like, it really, I feel like it does happen more in group work, and when they're not accountable, when they don't have seminar leaders and lecturers there to keep them to account and make sure that everyone's having an equal chance to speak, they really take advantage of that.
Yeah, and it also shows they're kind of low-key aware of it, that it is inappropriate, and they save it for a situation they can't be called out on it. By in a public realm.
Yeah, exactly. The next account: in a university competition, my male competition partner spoke over me and publicly disregarded the points that I made. I later made the same points, ensuring that my voice and opinion were heard.
Oh, good for you. That's great. It's just awful. Why in a competition in front of all these people? It's awful.
Notice that it says my competition partner. So does that mean the person who's on your team, or does that mean like your...
probably.
Wow, so you're not, it's not that it's like the other contestant, it's your partner who's disregarding your own points. That's just so embarrassing.
Well, I'm glad you said your points, because that's really ridiculous that someone in your own team would do that to you.
Exactly.
So well done.
Well done.
Yeah, so the next one is: a recurring experience I have found to be incredibly frustrating and enraging was getting mansplained and whitesplained something by a person who has obviously not experienced the world as I have. They chose to explain what is correct in my experience of the world. I honestly believe it's a defense mechanism where the person gets stunned by the truth, shocked he is made implicit, or felt like he is being attacked, and so what they'll do is interrupt and give their opinion from feigned ignorance.
Yeah, that's very true. I think it's definitely a defense mechanism. I like the way she said that. It's like they also almost feel guilty, or they feel like they're in the wrong, and so they try and like cover up what you're saying and say things that would belittle you because they feel uncomfortable by the truth. There were also a lot of responses discussing mansplaining in a work environment too. So one of them said, I often get explained things that I already know by male co-workers, even though I've worked longer than them. Often during team meetings, I would say one thing and it would be reiterated by a man, and it's heard with a lot more consideration and attention.
Oh, I hate that. Like, you know, it's like when you're in school and you answer a question that the teacher's asked, and then someone just basically says it louder than you and gets all the credit. But that's a lot worse because it's you know, done in a kind of sexist context too. So that's really, really rough.
Yeah.
And the next one we have here is, my old workplace, tuition centre, was dominated by male heads. The department I worked with was all female, which was the English department, and the other departments, maths and science, were male dominated. The head of the centre and the males in maths and science were awfully chummy. They could joke about, take breaks, not be questioned, have things easily slide. But for us girls, things were strict. We were watched all the time, questioned about the quality of teaching, etc. If we ever wanted to raise a suggestion or concern, it was laughed off with a shrug and a "I'll think about it." In comes a male maths tutor, laughter erupts in the office, and he even sits in the head's chair, swings about, talks idle talk. But it's fine for him, right? He's the boy.
That account is so that makes me so angry.
Very raw. Like, thank you for telling us these, you know, your experiences, because I can hear the frustration coming out in your expression here. It's just, I'm really sorry you've all been through things like this, and it should never happen.
It really shows the double standard, like you said. For us girls, it's a completely different story.
They just have like an attitude where they know that they won't get caught because they've been in situations that have conditioned them to believe that they can get away with it. And you know, it shows the product of that conditioning of feeling like they can, you know, carry on doing what they want because it's a different standard for men and women.
Yeah, I think that also relates to the fact that, I don't know, from my own personal experience, I feel like women in academia feel they need to work so much harder, and they're always on their game because they feel like they have to prove themselves, and they feel like they have to work hard, whereas guys don't necessarily, not that guys don't work hard, but some guys have this attitude where they feel like, oh, I don't need to because I can just mess around and, you know, it's fine, I'll still
they
get
acknowledge the system is in their favour, and there's more barriers that women have to kind of get past, and that's why they have to compensate for that.
Some also reported that they've experienced it in a social setting as well. So this one was just ridiculous. When a man thought he knew more, because stereotypically men know more about cars. Oh. Wow.
Gosh.
Oh, that is so annoying. I can feel your frustration, sis.
So is that in relation to like what, going to a garage, maybe talking about her car and explaining what's wrong, and someone's kind of...
I'm not sure. I mean, I think it was just in a general social setting, so maybe just like a family event or for something, and someone just happened to say that or think that they know more than her, even if they might not have like a qualification or expertise, but just because they're a man, which is really frustrating. And because men, obviously they know so much more about cars than we do, and things like that, because it's a stereotypically masculine hobby, which is just really dumb, because
you pick up on these like little nuanced stereotypes sometimes. And and another one was also saying how usually they've been mansplained in social settings, and unfortunately I've noticed this coming more from men from a BAME background, and I am also from a BAME background myself.
That's interesting.
That's really sad to hear as well. I mean, you'd think that coming from a BAME background, men would also understand the hurt you'd feel from prejudice and from you know, being talked down on because of where you're from or who you are. And that's really it's really sad. It's a thing that needs to be tackled within our own community as well as the world in general.
I feel like, unfortunately, we have a lot of internal prejudices within our own community, and a lot of it is not even Islamic, it's just culture.
Yeah.
And because culture prevails sometimes within people, you have all of these misogynistic mentalities coming out.
Definitely.
Interestingly, I also asked those surveyed whether or not they were a minority student in the subject that they study, and a whopping 87.5% of the BMA students, that's Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, who were surveyed, responded that they have experienced mansplaining. So there's definitely more of a proportional chance of BME students experiencing this type of behaviour than those not of an ethnic minority background.
That's eye-opening as well, in the sense that people who have mansplained these students, so essentially they are more likely to experience this because they are also BAME, and it just kind of brings the question up of do people think that because they're BAME and they already face a lot of prejudice that it's okay to just add to that prejudice with another view, extend that prejudice?
Yeah, I think it's because it's working on two different levels. It's not only are you a woman, you're within that category, you're also a BME woman. So it's a bit not only misogyny but also potential racism. It was really quite heartbreaking to have to read through all of these experiences because they were very raw, and it was really disappointing to hear that so many of you are going through these experiences, and I hope and pray that no one has to deal with any more of this type of behaviour from anyone again, inshallah. And I sincerely wish all of these women who've sent in these responses the best, and I want to let them know that, you know, their experiences are completely valid, and I urge anyone who's gone through anything like this to speak out about it and try and raise awareness of this type of treatment, because it's unacceptable. It shouldn't be allowed, and it's not okay, and every voice deserves to be heard and listened to rather than talked over and belittled.
Yeah, exactly. And whether you've experienced them in a social setting or at work or in volunteering, etc., anything you go through like this, inshallah, you'll get the reward for your sabr and your patience in that situation. And I pray every one of who's gone through something like this gets a full reward of the Muslim woman as just being patient in that situation and knowing that in the end, inshallah, justice prevails in the akhirah. And yeah, that's important to remember.
I also personally feel like women in general, like myself included, we feel the need to dampen our opinions and soften our thoughts when we're talking, because we don't want to be, you know, perceived as like bossy or, you know, unfriendly, whatever. We tend to overthink our words, and we conform to social niceties, kind of invalidate our own thoughts by saying, oh, I could be completely wrong, but I don't know, or use phrases like, oh, I'm not sure, does that even make sense, you know, things like that. And all of these terms I feel like I find myself using, and I hear other women using it all the time, and I think we need to actively avoid using language like this from now on and try and unlearn that, you know, passive kind of unconfident behaviour that we've been all conditioned to use as women, because men do try and take advantage of that, because if you sound unsure of yourself, then of course they're gonna not be sure of you either.
And I think the fact we experience these things in the first place makes us so insecure. We have to kind of say, oh, is this okay? It's something I guess we have to just acknowledge and work on as well. Whatever we are saying is really valid.
So if you're struggling with a similar problem of this, you could perhaps try replacing some of your words with more assertive phrases like this. So instead of saying, does that make sense? Replace it with, does anyone need further clarification? Or instead of saying, sorry when someone interrupts you, replace it with, please stop interrupting me, or as I was saying. And when someone is just straight up ignoring you, or getting credit for repeating your exact points, don't be afraid to say, I just said that. Or even better, thank you for reiterating my point. When someone interrupts you mid-sentence, don't be afraid to hit them with the classic and iconic phrase, did the middle of my sentence interrupt the beginning of yours? When you witness other women being mansplained or talked over, you could also say, insert name, this person was talking, please let her finish, or this person had something to say, how about we let her talk? And when you witness other women being ignored, or another person getting credit for her exact points, you can say, this person just said that. I personally really want to make a more conscious effort to incorporate some of these phrases into my daily life, especially in emails and during seminars.
Yeah, same here.
One of the responses was quite detailed, so we had to shorten it, but we loved it so much that we still wanted to include a bit more from it. So I'm just going to read the rest of it now. What I found most ironic out of all is that the so-called intellectuals studying at university do this more regularly. However, their tactic is a very sweet kind of subtle feigned ignorance, pretending, oh, I thought your religion... But doesn't your religion... don't all Muslims... Well, the Muslims I have met, and all you want to do is scream, no, John, you don't know anything about Muslims. You don't know anything about my religion and culture, and you mix them together as a way to make yourself feel that you're a saviour, a superior, the media version of the coloniser who comes to your space to save you from said space, especially as I'm such an oppressed woman who has no voice and is deluded with a fanatical approach to God. They can't bear the fact that their history was one of shedding blood that only ended merely 100 years ago, and because they can't come to terms with the oppression of how much effect it had on people, they like to shove the blame on someone else to make them feel good about their so-called liberal heroism, where they pretend they knew all about women's rights regarding since the beginning of time. John also has never actually interacted with a Muslim his entire life, and thinks just by seeing them walk on the streets or on his Netflix subscription, he automatically knows every facet of their lives. After all, John did get an A star in his eloquence and philosophy classes. The arrogance in being able to generalise a whole nation, community, religion, race, culture is dumbfounding. Sometimes not being a visible Muslim gives you the privilege to see the marks of prejudice cloaked in mansplaining and whitesplaining that unfortunately a scarf and a abaya doesn't get to really see.
Oh, that was really brilliant.
I love that response.
That was just so on point. I'm really sorry you had to go through that as well.
That response just leaves us completely
speechless. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you to everyone who filled out the survey and took the time out to send in their responses. We really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much. I can imagine it must have been hard for some of you to have to recall bad memories, and it's just really brave of you to share them with us. So thank you so much.
So now we'd like to end on a lighter note, and it's time for TikTok of the month. This TikTok was brought to you by Fatima Shalash.
So, pre-COVID, I had a friend that was interested in learning about Islam. So I took him to the masjid, he went to the men's side, and I went to the women's side. And later we come out, and he goes, Fatima, he doesn't know how to say my name. He said, Fatima, I thought Muslims weren't allowed to drink. And I was like, they're not. And he was like, they were offering beer on the men's side. And I was like, what do you mean they were offering beer? And he was like, they were saying take beer. And I was like, did you take any? And he was like, no, I held my hand out, but all they said was Allahu Akbar.
I just love the fact that she's like holding back laughter when she's saying it.
Yeah. So our next segment on Drop the Mic, we have an amazing spoken word poem by Huda Nusi.
Yeah, mashallah tabarakallah. She's a writer, spoken word artist, TEDx speaker, Down syndrome advocate, and a YouTuber.
Mashallah tabarakallah. Her poem is called Freedom.
3, 2, 1, go!
They sell us freedom, and we buy their chains. We think we've become free, but it all remains the same. The game never changed. In fact, the chains are getting tighter, because covering up, it's not okay. They tell me that I'm free, so I shouldn't dress this way. But see, here's the contradiction. We don't perceive freedom the same. When you label it freedom and tell me my wardrobe has to change, you are taking away my freedom, and only your freedom remains. Well, that's not fair. I'll let you in on a little secret. You are enslaved as well. And by whom, you ask me? Well, that is easy for me to tell. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the biggest slave of all? It's not me. Don't get me wrong, I have emotions and desires too. I fall in love, I get angry, I make mistakes just like you do. But my ego is not my master. I don't control or manipulate. I have ups and downs just like every other soul, but I rely on my faith. Why should I stop covering up for you to feel safe? Don't blame it on me that the media are your masters and you are their slaves. You believe every word they tell you. Then you turn around and you see me. Oh wait, you don't actually see me. You just see a hijabi. All these opinions, bans, and restrictions are really starting to get to me. So here's what we've got to do in order for everyone to be happy and free, including me. How about we lay down our weapons and stop being defensive? How about we voice our opinions without being offensive? You wear your skinny jeans, that's fine by me. And let me match my scarf with my pants perfectly. You want to party all along? I prefer talking to God at night. But we can still chit-chat at work. There's no need for us to fuss and fight. And when we're debating over political issues, let me refill your coffee. I'll respect you, you'll respect me, and we can agree to disagree. I am not the aggressive type. I just really want to be free. No dirty looks, no name calling, no bans, no restrictions, just a smile when you look at me. I come in peace. Really, there's no need to disrespect me. I wear what I wear freely. So could you please just let me?
Wow.
Mashallah, tabarakallah. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Huda.
Yeah, it was so powerful, so uplifting. If you guys enjoyed that, please do make sure you check out her Instagram account and her YouTube. It's at Hudanussi, HOUDANOUSSI, for her Instagram.
And for YouTube, you just have to search Huda Nusi.
Yeah, please do make sure you subscribe and support her content because it's really great stuff she's doing, mashallah. Also, starting from next month, we are actually taking submissions for poetry. So if you're interested in spoken word and you have some pieces that you would like to share in our next podcast, please DM us on Instagram, that's at Muslimedium, or visit us on our website, www.muslimedium.com, to find out more.
So now it's time to move on to our next segment.
Our next segment involves us all cozying up to a warm cup of chai, or alternatively any other form of halal drink or snack. We really want to create that atmosphere that we all are missing because of lockdown. We want to make you feel like you're in the same room as us and part of our conversation. So please do, if you can, grab some form of food or drink so you can feel part of our environment. Chai chats. So we are back and we have our chai, and we really wanted to start a discussion on the misconception that women in Islam somehow have less rights than men. In reality, women actually have a lot of rights in Islam.
So in Islam, Muslim women are given that right to own, inherit, dispose of their own property exactly as they see fit, They get to keep their own names and their identities after marriage. They can initiate divorce. They can obtain an education. All of this started back in the 7th century. Even rejecting forced marriages, which is again another misconception that arranged marriages are forced marriages, for example, is completely untrue. Muslim women can reject forced marriages, and it's well within their rights. Sadly, like the disrespect you see around the world towards women and Muslim women just stems from cultural biases rather than Islamic teaching. Islam gives us rights, but the world just needs to catch up with that.
Yeah. The reason why there's a lot of injustice around the world today and towards Muslim women is not to do with Islam, it's to do with culture and how doctrine or Islam has been manipulated in order to benefit patriarchal systems rather than Islam itself being inherently patriarchal. In fact, Islam is actually very liberating and gives so many rights to women, and it's just such a shame that places around the world and corrupt governments can manipulate things like that to their advantage, and people see culture being mixed with Islam and they sweep it all under one brush and think that Islam is bad, when in reality it's not.
And that's something that's really misconstrued in the media.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said before, Muslim women, all of their money that they earn from a job belongs to them, not their husband. Whereas the other way around, when a man works, he is expected to provide for the whole entire family, and his money becomes part of the family. Whereas a woman's money in Islam belongs completely to her, and she can spend it however she wills. At the time when Islam was being revealed, whilst Muslim sons were being told that paradise lay at the feet of their mothers, around the world the story was completely different. If you look at Christian doctrine and belief, which is what I was actually taught, and we studied this in school, well, some doctrine believes that women were actually responsible for the fall of the human race somehow, because Eve was supposedly said to have tempted Adam, and the menstruation and childbirth was seen as consequences of divine punishment and curse. And obviously that's not the original word of God. It's just been twisted and presented in a way that benefits men and portrays women as the villains. But in Islam, we don't believe this at all. We reject this idea completely, that women are somehow to blame for all of the fall of man.
Yeah. I think I've also heard in Jewish scriptures they also have that similar idea of that original sin being rooted in Eve's doing. In Islam, we don't believe that. Instead, we believe that Hawa alayhi salam and Adam alayhi salam both slipped and fell equally, and there isn't any, indication at all, any way that it was her fault. Yeah, and I mean, it also brings to mind the idea that if we look at English history, even, English Christians actually had burned thousands of women alive just on the suspicion that they were witches. Married women in Europe didn't even get the right to have own property, obtain a divorce, entered into their own contracts until like the 19th century. And that's exactly why you had so many women rebelling and the whole suffragette movement in order to try and gain those rights that they were suffering from the lack of before.
And that was only in the last 2 centuries. In Islam, we had this well in advance.
Yeah, exactly.
The right to be able to have a political voice and get involved. As a woman, that was something that was lacking in the West for a really long time, but we had that in Islam in the 7th century.
Exactly. And then I guess also that idea that, because a lot of women today are fighting for their rights in the sense that they're looking for better treatment that they've lacked for so many years, it also kind of feeds into that narrative of how they also see Muslim women as having that automatic same history as them, due to their own kind of teachings and their own treatment. And it's almost like, you don't see people how they are, you see them as you are. And
the psychological kind of
exactly
mentality. Yeah.
And that's something that's really misconstrued in the media.
That idea that you just mentioned actually relates a lot to Orientalism, the theory by Edward Said, a Muslim Palestinian theorist, because it's all about the study of the East from the West's perspective. So it's not seeing countries in the East for how they actually are, but rather from how the West perceives it to be.
Yeah, and that's affected how the media sees us as Muslims as well.
Yeah. Yeah, the media really presents us wrongly as oppressed and victims, submissive wives, when in reality, if any of this was actually true, why is it the case that the European and American reverts to Islam are majority women, not men?
Yeah.
And why is it that so many Muslim women are practicing and they're not being driven away from their faith? If it was so misogynistic as the media makes it out to be, why are there so many Muslim women and Muslim women reverts? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up.
Exactly. That's so true.
And Islam came at a time where women's rights were direly needed. In pre-Islamic Arabia, people would bury their female babies out of shame. And the Quran actually came down with verses telling people that this is wrong and that they shouldn't bury their babies.
And that they should also give women their complete rights.
Yeah. I'm all out of chai now, so let's move on to the next section, which is our Agony Aunty Jee.
Agony Aunty Jee.
In light of World Hijab Day, which took place this month, we thought it would be a great time to answer the question about hijab, in case anyone is thinking about wearing it, inshallah.
So hijab is more than just a cloth. It's a whole practice of modesty, both inner and outer.
Yeah, although we all see hijab as something that's highly honourable, sometimes cultural mentalities often present the outer garment as being more optional.
But actually, the majority of scholars agree that hijab is a fard, mandatory duty within our deen, and it becomes obligatory on girls when they reach the stage of puberty and begin their menses.
In the Quran, the direct commandment for women is to cover their hair, neck and chest, and that's in Surah An-Nur, Ayah 31. And the intention behind this action should be to solely please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by fulfilling his commandments.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us and he knows what's best for us, and we have to understand that all of his commandments are from his infinite wisdom, whether we fully understand it or not, and that's why we should submit to our creator by following this commandment.
From our own experience, we're both hijabis, and something that we found is that the beauty in wearing it allows others to judge us for what's on the inside and not what's on the outside and what we look like. And what becomes more apparent is our character and our morals and our values. It also makes you more identifiable as a visible Muslim.
Yeah, that's so true. And I guess we're also an advocate for our faith through dawah. Just people seeing us can really change their perspective. They might start researching hijab, then go on to research Islam, and they might even find the deen through seeing someone who is wearing a hijab.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about wearing hijab, our advice would be to you to do your research and to make that decision for yourself. It's better to take your time and really commit to it than to just rush into it and then end up taking it off later.
But also we have to take into account that this is something we need to think about at length today, because we don't know when our next moment will be our last.
Yeah, that's so true. It shouldn't be something that you just put off till you're older. We should all try to practice our deen in the present to the best of our ability.
Yeah, exactly. Also, one thing that's also important to consider if you're already a hijabi is that although there are a lot of Muslim women who aren't wearing hijab, that doesn't necessarily mean we have the right to judge a non-hijabi. If this is a fard commandment and they're not fulfilling that third commandment, that's between them and Allah, and that's not something that we have a right to judge anyone else, except only to just remind others who might not know. And I think it's also, as we mentioned earlier, the important thing to think about is how there is an inner dimension of hijab, which is just as important as the outer element. And people always forget that, especially if you have, for example, a hijabi who may not be practicing modesty in their own behavior, whereas there could be a non-hijabi who is practicing modest behavior in her actions. So we have to understand that it's important to have both, but there's no right to judge anyone else because they could be better than you if you are a hijabi.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Also, there's no compulsion in religion either. So forcing hijab on anyone is completely wrong. It should be a decision that the individual makes for themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And yeah, as you said, we have no right to judge anyone. Another thing is, people don't realise men have hijab too, but just in a different way. So for guys, their aura is between the navel to the knee, and they still have to maintain their modesty by covering in a loose fashion.
In Islam, a beard for men is also a sunnah wajib, and the vast majority of scholars say that it's obligatory and highly recommended as it's very close to a fard.
To end our podcast, we would like to leave you with the Islamic Hadith: the best of you are those who are best to their women. And that's from Al-Tirmidhi. The act of the month is to treat the women in your life well. Whether that be your mother, your daughters, your sisters, show the women in your life how much you really appreciate them.
We're now going to share with you our riddle for this month. So the riddle is, leave me and you will never find the treasure. Use me and you will attain Allah's pleasure. What am I?
Ooh. So make sure that you tune into our next podcast to find out the answer.
And that concludes our podcast. If you guys have any spoken word poetry which you'd like to share with us, or if there's any questions you'd want to ask to our Agony Aunty Jee, please send it to us through our website, which is Muslimedium.com. And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Take care and have a nice day, guys. Bye.
See you next month.